Hello again from the Agakala Reaction. Today we will be watching How Islam Saved Western Civilization. And I was asked to make reaction to this video. But it's a long video. It's 2 hours and 13 minutes and 26 seconds. And after, well, looking at some other people reacting to it, I'm gonna do it in parts, but I am not going to upload it day after day or even in one day, because I am uploading only one video a day every day, and each day it's sort of different theme. If you notice, if you go into my channel, you can see. And I've decided, because as well I was asked to react to different historical series of videos by someone else, and I kind of want to do it as well because it sounds really interesting. So I'll be doing it every second week. So I'm gonna record for this long video now, for the 2 hour long video, for about 20-25 minutes, and I'm gonna upload that. And then next week I'm gonna do reaction to the first video of the other series, the series that I was asked to react to as well, and I'll be uploading that every 2 weeks. So basically this week gonna be How Islam Saved the Western Civilization. Next week is gonna be the other one, the first episode of the series, and then in 2 weeks time I'm gonna watch another 20-25 minutes of the How Islam Saved the Western Civilization. And it's from Austin School, and it's a talk, I think. I kind of watched it a little bit, and it's a talk by Dr. Roy Casagranda. So let's just get into it. Let's just watch. And I see that I keep having technical difficulties with my setup here, so I have to keep an eye on my microphone, because the first video for this week that I recorded didn't have any sound. So yes, I better be, if there will be some silence, if you see me moving my mouth and there will be no sound, yep, I messed up again. Okay. So let's just start with this one and just go.
To start, I actually want to start by admitting something, which is, so the title of this talk is How Islam Saved Western Civilization. For the record, I believe that that is a totally accurate statement. There's nothing, this isn't an attempt to back away from that title at all. The thing I want to admit is the title of this talk is How Islam Saved Western Civilization. I have nested a contradiction in the title that I'm going to show you later on purpose, because I like to do things like that. It's just my nature. So I just want you to know I'm admitting this right off the start. So to start this thing off, though, I also want to admit something else, which is that I picked the title because there's a book that kind of inspired me. But the book is deeply flawed. And the book is How the Irish Saved Civilization. I got the book, I want to say like 22 years ago. Okay. And I hate doing this because it feels like I'm picking on somebody, but the book is deeply flawed. It's riddled with two contradictions, in fact. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because those are some of the contradictions I want to tease out in this talk. So here's the premise of the book. On September 4, 476 AD, the Roman Empire collapsed. It was a very sad day. There was much lamenting. And then the Irish saved civilization because the Irish had already converted to Christianity. And Christianity, of course, is the core of civilization. And so the Irish went to Europe and converted those awful pagan Germanic tribesmen to Christianity and saved civilization in the process. That's
the first time I hear stuff like that.
Multiple levels. The first and most obvious level is Rome didn't fall on September 4, 476 AD. So if the whole idea is that the Irish saved civilization from collapse, but it didn't collapse, then the premise is already shot out of the water. We're already in trouble. Rome fell May 29, 1453. It's almost 1,000 years later.
Yeah.
This isn't a small error. This is a gigantic error. So that's one problem. Another problem with the premise is the following. Most of the Germanic tribesmen were Christian. So if the Irish are converting them to Christianity, that's odd.
Very,
It's like
actually.
when President William McKinley said, we're conquering the Philippines to make it Christian. And they're, you know, like 80% of the Filipino
Correct.
population were...
So far, this man kind of goes jumping from one thing to another, and I'm kind of liking it because it's kind of like my. This is how I do it too. When I'm telling the story, there will be a piece of that information from this and piece of that. It's absolutely nothing to do. Like maybe there is. It's just kind of like something similar comparing, but so far I'm enjoying it.
We're Catholic. Of course, what McKinley meant was to make them Protestant. But anyway, that's a different story. We're just going to genocide 800,000 of these folks and hopefully flip them over to Protestantism. Didn't work. So the second contradiction, that they were going to convert the Germanic tribesmen into Christianity, is actually shockingly similar to the McKinley thing I just brought up.
Alright, actually, I don't know, because it seems like it's gonna be very interesting, but I don't want to make this video too long, so I might just set it in timer for, I don't know, 20 minutes. Yep, and we are like in, well, 3 minutes in. So after that time, I'm just gonna try to find a nice spot to kind of stop and come back in 2 weeks' time. So let's just go back now.
Converted, some of them were still pagan. But the ones that had converted were the wrong kind of Christian. That's what he really means. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine decided that Christianity was too unwieldy of a religion. It was too complicated, too mysterious.
Well, yeah, kind of.
There were too many moving parts, and it needed to be toned down a little bit. In part to get rid of some of the contradictions. Like, for example, the Trinity. It was driving everybody nuts, right? How does this work? He's what? And so Constantine said, I want 318 of you theologians to go to Nicaea and figure out how to make Christianity into something a little bit more manageable, because if Rome was already majority Christian at that point, if the Roman Empire is going to use Christianity as a state religion to manipulate people, we as the politician class...
That is so on point, isn't it? Like most of the time, if you look at the history, most of the time, the emperors, the rulers were using religion to kind of like, literally that's what the man said, manipulate people to follow their rules and stuff.
We need to be able to know what Christianity is. How can we manipulate people through religion if we don't understand the religion? So they get together at Nicaea. They come up with a solution for the Trinity. There were 30 Gospels. They threw 26 away. They ordered them destroyed. It didn't...
30 Gospels? Is that the 4 Gospels? Matthew... I don't even know the names. Okay, let's just listen to it.
Quite work. We have the other 26. Most of them were found in Egypt by a farmer who was in the desert digging up phosphorus, and he hit a jar with his shovel, and he heard it crack, and he pulled the jar out, and he saw these leather-bound books. I want to say it was 46, 47, and he pulls out the leather-bound books, and he's like, I don't know what these are, but I know who will know. And he was Muslim, he went to the nearby church, the Coptic Orthodox Church, and he handed them to the priest, and the priest went, oh, I know what these are. These are the 26 Apocrypha. And the church then immediately declared it a miracle that somehow the 26 Apocrypha had survived. And the Coptic Church claims that all 30 Gospels are legit and rejects the rejection of the 26 Apocrypha. Apocrypha means wrong.
Like seriously, we're 5 minutes in the video and I'm learning learned so new things now. Like the whole thing about the old Gospels, the Gospels that they were just gone. No, we don't use those Gospels and stuff. I never even heard about that.
So it rejects the wrong, the declaration that they're wrong.
Cool.
At Nicaea, the 318 also had a conversation about one other problem. And the problem was how to understand Christ's nature on earth. If he was God, then how did he manage sin, for example? There was a guy named Arius of Alexandria. He was actually from Cyrenaica. Long story. He was living in Alexandria. That's where he made his career. Arius of Alexandria went, here's my suggestion. Jesus was God, pure God, total God. As a result, he was never tempted. Done. No sin. But the majority said, no, that's wrong. Jesus was God in a man's body. The body was tempted. Therefore, he did experience what it would be like to be tempted, but because he was God, he overcame it, and there was no sin. That became Orthodox doctrine. The other part became heresy. It's known as the Arian heresy. Arian with an I, not a Y. I is Arius of Alexandria. Y is the horse people who conquered India and Ireland.
I'm confused now.
That's the Arian heresy. It took off in Egypt. It took off in Syria. And the Germanic tribesmen really liked it. So that's what's being converted. They're being taken away from the Arian heresy into what we would have considered mainstream Christianity. Of course, in the United States, the average American Christian is an Arian heretic. I can prove it to you. There is a Greek guy who wrote a book called The Last Temptation of Christ. His name was Nikos Kazantzakis. The Last Temptation of Christ is Orthodox Christian belief. Christ was tempted as a man, but overcame it because he was God. Americans went nuts when Scorsese turned this into a movie. The French also went nuts. They actually set a historical movie theater on fire while people were in it because they couldn't believe that a movie that could be this heretical could be made when the reality was they were the heretics. That was the church's official belief.
That's funny. No laughter? Really?
That's hilarious. All right, fine.
Wow, okay. You see what I'm talking about, me being kind of similar to him? What's that? Because it's like, yeah, I find it's funny. Like they were thinking, oh, this is heretism, blah blah blah, blah. But actually, they are because the official belief was like that. So it's just
right. The assumptions that we go into these conversations with, like, oh, the Germanic tribesmen are pagans, and oh, right, and the reality is it's way more complicated.
It's always more complicated with religion.
I want to start with the definition of Western civilization. I've covered this before in other lectures, but I have to treat every lecture like a standalone. So if you've heard me before, forgive me for any redundancy. I will try not to focus too much on this particular definition just because I've covered it in other lectures, but I still need to do this. So,
I feel like I need some popcorn to watch him.
If you take a college level
or maybe
course,
nachos with some
Intro
cheese
to Western Civilization, and for the record, I'm a political scientist, but history is obviously a thing of mine, and I did teach for a few years with the University of Maryland University College, and I did teach their Intro to Western Civilization class. So I'm also telling you this as a person, as a recovering Intro to Civilization professor. Usually, every school is probably a little bit different because it depends on the textbook and the professor, but usually the class starts in 5,400 BC, sorry, 3,400 BC, or if you're like me and you reject BC because it's confusing, 5,400 years ago. And then the class usually goes, it depends again on the text and the professor, but it usually goes to 1648 with the end of the 30 Years' War, which didn't end in 1648 and lasted about 50 years, just for the record. So just to make things not work. And then Intro to Western Civ 2 usually starts in 1648 and goes to the present, which I've always thought was remarkable because it shows our bias for the contemporary period, because we're going to take 5,000 years of history, 5,400 years ago, to 400 years ago, and we're going to compress that into 16 weeks, and then we're going to do 3.5 centuries in 16 weeks. It seems like an unfair distribution. We're literally giving the recent century 17 times the attention that we gave the old centuries. But okay, set that aside for a moment. odds are good that your professor will start this class with maybe one, maybe two, but probably one lecture on Mesopotamia and Sumer and the beginning of writing. And then maybe the second lecture will briefly cover Egypt. And then from there, your professor is going to probably go on and spend a huge amount of time on the Greeks, an enormous amount of time on the Romans, and then...
So I kind of missed the part there now. Is he saying this is introduction to civilization or Western civilization? Because if it's just civilization, like, they should start kind of thinking about China as well, and India. They're thousands years old too as well, isn't it? And there were civilizations in South America and Africa as well. So it's like, I kind of wonder about that. I think I just missed some words.
Maybe a lecture on the Middle Ages. They lasted 1,000 years. Maybe it gets a lecture. And then there'll be a lecture or two at the end of the class because the Italians go, hey, I have an idea, let's do the Renaissance, and that's a really exciting time period. And then the class ends with the completion of the 30 Years' War, when Protestants and Catholics slaughter each other wholesale in Europe. The 30 Years' War is one of my favorite wars because Spain and Sweden fight each other. You know what I mean? You almost don't need to know anything else about the war. They fought 3 battles in Germany. The Spanish army and the Swedish army met in Germany, and they beat the crap out of each other. For the record, the Swedes, while they were in Germany, plundered it. So did the Spanish, of course. Yeah. You're in Germany, come on, of course you're gonna plunder. And they stole a bunch of stuff from the city of Würzburg, and they took it back to Sweden, and a bunch of that ended up in museums. And the city of Würzburg, a few years ago, sued Sweden to get their stuff back from 1648. And the European Union went, no, sorry, too bad you lost.
Oh, man. Oh, because that would be such a... I know what's gonna happen. It's because it would be what they call it, precedent. And if Sweden would have to give it back to the German city, the stuff that they plundered hundreds of years ago, England and Germany itself would have to do the same thing. All of those museums that they have, all of this ancient stuff that's basically plundered from different parts of the world during the colonization times, is it? Is that going to happen?
Because if Stockholm had to return to Würzburg its plundered goods, then Berlin and London would have to return to Egypt.
Berlin have lots of stuff too, isn't it? I watched the video. I made reaction to it as well.
Catastrophic event for museums in Europe, right? One of my favorite museums on the planet is the Pergamon Museum. It's in Berlin. If you love anything to do with the Middle East, it is amazing. You have to go to the Pergamon in Berlin. They have a whole Greek temple that the Germans took out of Turkey, stone by stone. They have the gates of Babylon that they took out of Iraq, stone by stone, and they erected it inside a building specifically constructed to have these 2 marvels inside. And in a way, I'm grateful because you can go see it, they're intact, they're preserved. In a way, I'm horrified because these weren't German national treasures.
Yes, exactly. Someone else's national treasures in different country.
That's in Berlin. In Turkey, I've been to Pergamon. And there's like you know where it is. It's like, wow, so I've been to both. I've seen where it's supposed to be, and I've seen where it is. The reason why I'm bringing up the class is because
actually, he was talking about something different.
Interesting admission, and then a massive omission. The admission is that Western civilization started on the banks of the Euphrates, the Tigris, and the Nile, and then they're never talked about again. That's it. Cover it for a week, and then in the next 31 weeks, we're going to talk about how amazing European civilization really was. Now, obviously, European civilization is amazing. I mean, I'm, after all, speaking a European language in North America. You don't get here and conquer 2 whole continents without at least not having a really strong propensity to violence. You know what I mean? There has to be something there. It didn't just happen. I'm 0% Native American, 23andMe broke my heart. I was really hoping I'd be, like I could have my little dances with wolves fantasy. Just, no. So,
He's funny.
you know, here we are. Shame. So it's not to reject that there doesn't need to be a story about Europe. It's to wonder about the question, wait a minute, you started in Sumer. Now, I wouldn't have started in Sumer for a different reason. I'm a political scientist, I'm not a historian. Historians start in Sumer because 5,400 years ago is when they mostly agree, there's a little bit of disagreement, that that's when writing started. What a historian is, they're different from a political scientist. A historian believes that civilization starts with writing because a historian is a literary critic who does nonfiction. The difference between a historian and an English major is
way of seeing
English majors do fiction, historians do nonfiction. So if there isn't something written, there's nothing for historians to talk about. I, on the other hand, don't care about that. The only thing I care about is politics. So I think government starts civilization, not writing. In fact, why did writing happen in the first place? What happened was bureaucrats were trying to figure out how to keep track of how many cows they had, how much wheat they had stored in the granaries, how many swords they had, how many horses they had, and the politician class went to the bureaucrats and said, you need to come up with some mechanism to keep track of all of this. And so the bureaucrats began coming up with symbol sets for numbers and for items, and over time those symbol sets evolved into writing. In other words, government had to come first. The year is 6,264, according to the ancient Egyptian calendar. At some point, an ancient Egyptian politician said, you know what sucks? That the farmers don't know what day to plant their crop every year. If we made a calendar and kept track of when spring started, that would really make our lives easier. In other words, even the advent of the calendar isn't the start of civilization. There was a government before that. By the way, just for the record, the Egyptian calendar doesn't have leap years in it, so it's off by 0.24 years. It's actually 0.239, I think. So in other words, you need to do a leap year every 4 years, but every 100 years you need to skip leap year, but every 1,000 years you need to go ahead and do the leap year you would have normally skipped. So in the year 2000, we were supposed to skip that leap year, but we weren't because it was the 1,000-year point, so that's why we went ahead and did it anyway. Really complicated, but a lot of fun. The ancient Egyptians, because they don't have that, their calendar is so old, they're off by 4 years. In other words, a way to think of it is the first day of spring has rotated through every single day of their calendar 4 times. So it's really the year 6,260, not 64. I'm bringing that up because what that meant then was farmers every 4 years had to actually move the date one day, right? Because the start of spring. And the Egyptians were like, people can keep track of that, let's just move on. This calendar won't be too wonky, complicated otherwise. Egypt probably created government about 6,500 years ago. So civilization in Egypt is probably about 6,500 years old. We think that the Sumerians probably started government a couple of centuries later. So the Sumerians beat Egypt to writing, but the Egyptians beat the Sumerians to government, and the two of them were always really close to each other whenever there was a development. So it just kept, whoever was first, the other guy was second. Sumer and Egypt, they just kept flipping back and forth in developments.
Okay.
So another way to look at this is Egypt was conquered by the Romans in 31 BC. This is a pretty catastrophic event for Egypt at every level, in part because the Romans were rough. To give you an idea what I mean by the Romans were rough, when Gaius Julius Caesar, the guy you incorrectly called Julius Caesar, his first name was Gaius, his last name was Julius. His name that modified his last name was Kaiser. Gaius Julius Caesar. Julius is his his actual last name. What type of Julius was he? He was a Kaiser Julius. That's how his name actually worked. But anyway, so the guy that you guys incorrectly called Julius Caesar, when he conquered Gaul, today France, he killed 1 million of the Celtic population living in Gaul.
A million?
There you go. How bad was that exactly? There were 3 million Gauls.
Oh!
He murdered 1/3 of the population. He enslaved another million. And then he turned and looked at the remaining million and went, welcome to the Roman Empire. Republic. Because they hadn't quite yet
killed a million? Out of 3 million?
Right? That was the Roman way. Now the Romans varied in how cruel they were. So when they got to Dacia, they killed and enslaved everybody.
Where?
In fact, they were so thorough about destroying Dacia, you don't know where Dacia is. It's effectively been erased from history. I'll tell you where it is. It's Romania.
Romania?
As in
really?
The Romans
There comes my timer.
erased it from existence and then named it after themselves. And it still holds the new name.
That's such a...
When the Romans conquered Egypt, they wanted to crush the Egyptian population. So they did things like they banned Egyptians from owning land. They banned Egyptians from riding horses. They banned Egyptians from doing anything but wearing the color blue. Egyptians had to always wear blue. And the Romans did this because they knew that the Egyptian population was going to be complicated to rule over. And then they were right. The Egyptians kept rebelling, so the Romans kept massacring them by mass crucifixions. Romans loved crucifixions, and they would just crucify whole segments of the Egyptian population and then say, look, this is going to happen to you if you keep rebelling. And of course, the Egyptians just kept rebelling. So if we decide that Egyptian civilization stopped abruptly in 31 BC, I'm happy to do that for purposes of this conversation, then by the time it got to 31 BC, Egypt's civilization was 4,000 years old. Another way to think of this is when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and went to the pyramids for the first time and gazed upon the pyramids. The Giza pyramids, which were not the oldest pyramids, right? The Saqqara pyramids are the oldest pyramids. The Giza pyramids are 200 years younger. The Giza pyramids were 2,300 years old for him.
It's old.
So when he was looking at the pyramids, he was going, I can't believe this is 23 centuries old. That's so insanely ancient. He was 23 centuries ago.
Wow.
We are as far from Alexander the Great as the pyramids were from him.
This is how old is this?
To give you a little sense of it.
Yeah, I
In
gotta
other
finish
words,
here because this is really good. This is really good. Thank you very much for recommending it. That is really good. I'm on like 23 minutes, and I'll probably, if I be not recording it, the reaction, I probably would watch while I'm doing something in the kitchen, or peeling and things like that. But I can't really do such a long reactions. It's not visible. People wouldn't watch it. Like barely anyone watches my reactions anyway. So yeah, but this is really good. The man is really funny. He have loads of information in his head, and he kind of jumps in between. He always puts something in as well. So I'm definitely gonna continue that in 2 weeks time. So I'm at 23 minutes 31, and yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. What you like? That is very worth watch. So thank you very much for watching, and I see you tomorrow, and you'll see continuation in 2 weeks time. Thanks. Bye.